So the article is called The Eye of the Beholder, and Matt Baum and I are the ones who wrote it. So here's what we did with this experiment. Okay. We had 1,500 people that were part of our survey. They thought they were just taking a survey. They didn't know that they were actually involved in an experiment. And the first thing we did was we had them complete a survey. And we asked them a bunch of questions about different news channels. We asked them whether they thought ABC was liberal or conservative. CNBC was liberal or conservative. We asked them about a bunch of different media outlets and asked them whether they thought they were conservative or liberal. But we really only cared about their answer to two questions. Do you think Fox is liberal or conservative? And do you think CNN is liberal or conservative? Let me go ahead and just write those down so you guys remember. Fox and CNN. Now, we asked them about a bunch of different media outlets. We asked them about 20 of them, but mostly because we didn't want them to know what we were really interested in. We didn't want them to know that we were interested in what they thought about Fox and CNN, so we asked them about a bunch of them to just throw them off. Then afterwards, what happened is they all saw a news report or read a news transcript. It was like, instead, they were on TV, the actual report, but the transcript was just the words. Right? Do you know what I mean? So, for example, for the one with CNN, it started off and there'd be, you people are going to have to wait. So once they started doing the experiment, they would read something, and this was the thing from CNN, and it would be something like, "This is Wolf Blitzer. This is Wolf Blitzer. We have a reporter in Milwaukee and a reporter in Green Bay covering the Kerry and the Bush campaigns," because it was about the 2004 presidential election. First, we go to the Kerry campaign, and then it would be the reporter, and it would just be the words. The reporter saying, "This is Candy Crowley reporting from the Kerry campaign. Kerry was on the stump today talking about this and blah, blah, blah." Just like a typical report. Does that make sense? Do you guys get the idea of what I'm talking about? And so every time we showed them one little section of the news report, when they were done, we would say, was this liberal, moderate, balanced, or conservative? We asked them for each one. So we wanted to just get an idea of whether they thought the coverage was biased. The thing about the news report is that after people filled out the survey and they clicked continue, some people saw a report from CNN, some people saw a report from Fox News, and some people saw a report from KNWZ. Now, for those of you who don't know what KNWZ is, don't be alarmed, because we made it up. We thought there was no KNWZ at the time. It turns out there's a few KNWZs, but we wanted to make up an organization because we wanted some people to see the news report and have no prior thoughts about the station. People had some thoughts about Fox, some about CNN, but nobody could have any thoughts about KNWZ because we made it up. And the news report itself, I wrote it. It was fake. I wrote it. I looked at a bunch of different news reports and then just basically came up with a balanced report that I wrote myself. These people saw the news report, but all the people who were reporting it were from CNN. These people saw the same exact thing, but instead of it being Wolf Blitzer, who works for CNN, this one started out being, this is Brent Hume reporting, the guy who works for Fox, and all the reporters were from Fox. And then over here, I used the names of my neighbors, because I had to come up with names for like these people. So you ever try to come up with a fake name? It's really hard. Then I just started going down my block. Okay, Sharon Morgan's this, and this person's that. Just use my neighbors' names, and they became the reporters here. So here's the thing. Everybody is reading the exact same thing. Some people think they're getting something from CNN. Some people think they're getting something from Fox News. And some people think they're getting something from an organization called KNWZ. Which, by the way, we thought it was really clever because K-News. We were like, he was in Massachusetts at the time. We're like going back and forth. On the actual experiment, up here in the upper left-hand corner of the news report, we had a CNN logo. Over here we had the Fox logo. And so over here we had to come up with a fake KNWZ logo. So we're saying, a logo, I mean. So we had to create a logo, and then we were sending it back and forth, trying to like make it just right. It was like stupid till the wee hours in the morning getting it just right, so everything looked the same. Okay, so you see what's going on. Everybody's reading the exact same thing. They're reading identical coverage that's balanced. How do I know it's balanced? I wrote it for the purposes of making it balanced. Some people thinking they're seeing CNN. Some people thinking they're seeing Fox. Some people think they're seeing KNWZ. They're all reading the exact same thing. They don't know that. Because once you finish the survey, you're going for one or the other. We asked them if the news coverage favored President Bush or whether it favored Senator Kerry. And our idea was if it favored President Bush, then they felt there was a conservative bias. If it favored John Kerry, then it has a liberal bias. This is what we found out. Their beliefs, their prior beliefs, shape their perceptions of bias. If they thought that CNN or Fox, and when we asked them about the news organizations, at the beginning of the survey, when we asked them, do you think Fox is liberal, conservative, or balanced, or CNN liberal, conservative, balanced, if they thought that CNN or Fox was liberal, when they went ahead and read that news report, what do you think they saw? A liberal bias. They thought it was in favor of Senator Kerry. If they thought that CNN or Fox was conservative, they thought it favored Bush. They were all reading the exact same thing. But just by putting the CNN logo and the Fox logo up there and putting the names of the journalists up there, we were totally able to make them think it was either biased in favor of Kerry or in favor of Bush. When they saw KNWZ, they thought it was balanced.
Serious? Serious?
Same report.
What exactly?
Word for word, Wesley. Word for word.
So it's in their heads.
The bias that they were seeing
Right.
was not in the news. The bias that they were seeing was what they brought to the table.
Right.
Completely.
They just, yeah.
What I'm going to suggest to you guys, and it's something worth considering, and if you feel like if you're starting to get squeamish right now and getting a little defensive, there is evidence here that citizens create bias even when it's not there. I had a student at Moore Park College. Her name, I won't say her name because I'm recording again. When I met her at Moore Park College, she is probably one of the more conservative students I've ever met in my life. She was very young. She's 18 years old, very conservative. Brilliant. She left, when she left Moore Park College, she went to UCLA as a Regent Scholar, which is like the cream of the crop to get accepted there, and she's now at Harvard Law. This young lady was brilliant when I met her, and she's 18. She's brilliant now. And she was very conservative. And she said to me, she used to refer to the Los Angeles Times as the Democratic Times. She said the Los Angeles Times was basically the Democratic Party's organization. And I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you a newspaper article. And it's either going to be from the Los Angeles Times or it's going to be from the Washington Times. Now, the Washington Times is a more conservative paper. But I'm not going to tell you which one. I'm going to take out anything out of the article that might reveal what it is. And I want you to tell me if you can tell what it is. And she was up to the challenge. And so I sent her an article that was from the Los Angeles Times. And I got this email back from her later on. And this young lady blew me away. She said, I read the article, and I'm pretty sure it's from the Los Angeles Times. And she was right. But she said, but I know that if I had been reading it in the Los Angeles Times, I would have thought it was totally biased. But when I wasn't sure where it was from, it was very different. She read it entirely differently. Now, most people aren't that honest. This is a young lady who's very introspective. She was at 18, she was this way. She admitted that she knew at that moment that had she just picked that same article up and seen it in the LA Times with what she believed about the LA Times, she would have seen it as being totally biased. She still got it right. She still picked the right paper. But the point was made. So here's what I would suggest to people, especially for those of you who see bias in the news. And let me tell you a story about myself. I was reading Fox News FoxNews.com. I go to FoxNews.com frequently. And I do believe that in the same way that MSNBC has a liberal bias, they oftentimes have a conservative bias. So I go ahead and I look at one of the articles, and the headline is, to me, a very biased headline. And I start to read the article, and I'm like, here we go again. It's totally biased. I hate this stuff. Then I looked up at the top, and the article was written by the Associated Press. It wasn't a Fox News article at all. The Associated Press is another company that does their own articles. They're not even affiliated with Fox News. I was totally seeing bias in there myself. When I looked up and I saw it was the Associated Press, I'm like, oh, that was me seeing bias. We all do this to some extent. So I think that to some extent what's important for people to do when they're thinking about bias in the media is to figure out how much of the bias that you see is you. And then how much of the bias that you see is actually in the news. I'm not going to suggest to you that there isn't bias in the media. What I'm going to suggest to you is that there's probably not nearly as much as you think. So what I would do is I would encourage everybody to go to a news outlet that you typically think as being biased and read it differently. Or when you go to your news outlet, the one that you trust, imagine that you're seeing the news article that you're reading. If you're somebody who likes MSNBC, imagine if you're seeing that exact same report on Fox News. Would you view it differently? And that's how you'll find out how much of the bias that you see is your own and how much is actually in the news. Any questions on that? Then we are free to go.